So the American Conference Championship game is a play-in for the college football playoff. Far be it from me to forget to remind you, the college football public, as I've said for a long time, that a group of 5 team will make the playoff. So the Green Wave, I had them pegged as a playoff contender coming into the season, especially once they added Jake Retzloff, and here they are. If they beat North Texas, they'll be into the playoff. If North Texas wins, they'll be into the playoff. This is the first time since I believe it's 2012 that departing head coaches will square off in a conference championship game. Because John Sumrall at Tulane, he's going to Florida. Eric Morris at North Texas, he's going to Oklahoma State. I think both guys can have success at those respective spots. I'd watch for Morris at Oklahoma State. I think he could turn that around really fast. I think Florida's a wee bit tougher, but that's not what this segment is about. This is about the idea of the group of 5 getting 2 teams into the college football playoff, which is indeed possible. James Madison is going to smoke Troy in the Sun Belt Championship game. They're favored by 3 touchdowns. They'll probably cover that number. I think they'll win somewhere in the neighborhood of 48-10. Bob Chesney hasn't left yet. I appreciate that all these coaches are doing the anti-Lane Kiffin, and I know there's a lot more to that situation, but they're sticking with their teams and coaching through the postseason until they can go to their new, or until the season ends for them, then they will go to their new spots. But the idea that there could be 2 group of 5 teams in the playoff is not something I actually support. I'm not a fan of auto bids. And by the way, if you're a Big 12, specifically a BYU fan here, you should also be against auto bids for this very reason. It's going to keep BYU out of the playoff. The committee, I believe, and I do support this thinking, is not going to severely punish teams for making their conference championship game. So if Alabama loses to Georgia, I believe they'll still be in the playoff. If BYU loses to Texas Tech, I don't think the committee, as I talked about earlier, wants the optics of Miami being directly behind Notre Dame, who they beat. And I think they might just leave BYU sitting there at number 11. If that were to wind up being the case, in a world with no auto bids, BYU would get into the playoff, and so would Miami. Instead, Virginia is in a win and in scenario in the ACC championship game against Duke. The American winner is going to the college football playoff, likely as the 12 seed, which as of now would be a game at Autzen Stadium against Oregon. But if Duke wins the ACC, they're not going to rank Duke, and they shouldn't, because Duke will be an 8-5 team. They're a 5-loss team playing for a conference championship. That's the scenario that we've set up for ourselves. So I've made this very clear before, but it bears repeating. If I were a member of the committee, I would grade either on a 20 or 10, probably 10-point scale, because that's easier, and I would include half-point decimals. You get what I'm trying to say there. 1.5, 2.5, 3.5. Okay. I would have 2 separate 5-point scales, and I would combine them into one number. And those 2 separate scales would be best and most deserving. So if James Madison were to go 12-1 and win their conference championship, they've mostly blown out everybody that they have played. They lost to the only Power 4 team they have played all season long, which is Louisville, who's good, but not a top 25 team. Not in my rankings, not in the AP, not in the college football playoff. They're fine. It's a fine team. It's not a horrible loss. They didn't get blown out. They were competitive, but they lost the game. James Madison on the most deserving front would be probably about a 3.5. On the best front, because with most deserving, I'm looking at your record and the schedule that you have played. They'd be about a 3.5. For best, I would have James Madison at about a 1.5. Because they're beating up on the Sun Belt. I don't think they're one of the 12 best teams in all of college football, because they played an average team, a slightly above average team in the ACC, and they lost by 2 touchdowns. So no, I don't think because they're beating up on the Sun Belt, they're suddenly at the same level as everyone else. I don't think they're as good as Miami. I don't think they're as deserving as Miami, but they could get in because we've created the auto bid structure for the 5 highest ranked conference champions, which goes back to the television angle of all of this. It gives these games tremendous meaning and a lot of interest and intrigue, and we've got to watch them, and then people like me are going to talk about them. Why? Because that's the way the system is set up, whether we like it or not. But I would rather see both Notre Dame and Miami in the playoff than see 2 Group of 5 teams in the playoff. Because I do not believe that those teams, even though they have had good years, are more deserving of going to the playoff than Miami and Notre Dame. I do not believe that. And so the idea of a Group of 5 team getting into the playoff is not one I'm inherently opposed to. Take Tulane, for example. They've put real teams on their schedule this year. They went out and beat a couple of real teams. Northwestern is a bowl team, and Duke is in the ACC Championship game. Tulane beat them both. They lost to Ole Miss in convincing fashion, but at least they scheduled them. And I know it's hard for James Madison to get those sorts of schedules, those scheduled games sometimes, but the idea that if Duke wins, and Vegas thinks that's possible, FanDuel's got Virginia favored by just 2.5. If Duke wins the ACC championship game, James Madison will be in. And they will not be as good of a team as Miami or BYU. They will not be as deserving of a team as Miami or BYU. And yet they'll be in the college football playoff. You cannot get me to support that. I'm not opposed. When Cincinnati made the playoff in the 4-team era, I was 100% on board with it. You know why? Because they played Notre Dame, who was really good, and then they won every single one of their games. And I'm not opposed at all to the committee looking at those resumes and saying, yeah, you've got to be unbeaten. Maybe you could be considered, like Boise State last year. Didn't have a huge objection. They rolled just about everybody. They went to Oregon, who was the number 1 seed in Eugene, and they lost by 3 points. If you can put together a resume like that, yeah, I could be in favor of it. But to say that they should automatically get one in there, no, I do not support that whatsoever. And I know some folks are going to be really unhappy with me hearing this particular take. And you can think, well, it's not fair that this, and they've got to have that. No, I'm not opposed to access. I just want a higher threshold than, yeah, you automatically get one. I'm not a participation trophy kind of guy. I'm an anti-participation trophy. Go out there and actually earn it. And I do not believe that any of these teams, any of these Group of 5 teams, have earned the right to be in the college football playoff. They're going to get in. They're going to get there. Tulane's the closest. But I mean, North Texas's best win is probably Washington State, who's kind of a hybrid Power 4 Group of 5 team right now. They're really closer to a Group of 5. They have a bunch of guys that came over from South Dakota State. I think Jimmy Rogers will do a good job. But North Texas's best win this year, yeah, is Washington State. Maybe Navy. Maybe I'm sorry, I cannot get on board with that. James Madison's best win this year, their schedule is even worse because they lost to Louisville, their best win. Also, Washington State, they won by 4 points. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. When Cincinnati played Notre Dame, who was in the top 10 and beat them, that showed definitively, oh, okay, this team can play at that sort of level. But when you don't have anything on your resume to prove that you're capable of playing up with legitimate Power 4 competition, with a top 15, 20 team, yeah, no, absolutely not. Again, Boise last year, totally good with it. I would have made them an at-large team. Obviously, they were the Group of 5 champ, but I think they had an at-large resume. I was okay with that. But 2 Group of 5 teams getting in, man, I'm just, nope, not going to get there. Not going to get there. But I'll talk about these teams anyway, because this is the system that we've got, and these are clearly the best Group of 5 teams. So, Conference Championship weekend's another day closer. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.